Today on Sports Card Investor, the 117-year search for a missing baseball card. An epic Father's Day story that has a very happy ending. My name is Jeff Wilson. By day, I invest in tech companies. And at night, I invest in sports cards. Join me on my journey to profit from the hobby we all love. Sports card investors, and welcome to another episode. I hope you are having a wonderful week, and I hope you are excited about this weekend and Father's Day upcoming. And that leads me into my story today about this awesome search for this missing baseball card. I cannot wait to tell you about it. But first, I want to tell you about a sports card show that is happening this week. One of the largest sports card shows in North America is taking place the next couple of days virtually. It's called the Sport Card Expo. It is Canada's largest sports card show. And because of the fact that they can't have the show in person right now, due to health concerns and restrictions, they have taken it virtually. Now, you may have heard me talk about how Sports Card Investor is doing our own virtual sports card show, the Virtual Sports Card Con 2020, at the end of July when the National was originally planned for. These guys at Sport Card Expo are doing their own version of the show the next couple of days. And in fact, Sports Card Investor is going to be there. We're going to have a virtual booth set up, and I will be speaking at the show. So you're going to want to check this out and be part of it. It is completely free to attend and register. The website is sportcardexpo.com, sport without an S, sportcardexpo.com. You can register for free. The show takes place Friday and Saturday of this week from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. both days, and they have tons of dealers from around Canada and I think around the U.S. as well who are going to be there and are going to be participating and are going to be offering some really great deals on sports cards. So check out sportcardexpo.com and come stop by the Sports Card Investor booth and say hi while you are there. Okay, guys, let's get into the story today. This is really, really cool. This story is about the 117-year search for a baseball card, a family legend, that this baseball card existed, but no one could really prove it, and no one really knew about it, but it was the baseball card of the great-grandfather of the person we're going to speak to today. Don Emerson, he lives in Oregon. His great-grandfather played for the Philadelphia Phillies and some other teams at the turn of the 19th century. And they, for 117 years, were searching for his baseball card from the historic 1903 set. It's a cool story with a great ending and a great lead into your Father's Day. So without further ado, let's bring in Don Emerson to hear about this story. Hey, Don, welcome to Sports Card Investor.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. I'm excited to have you on the show. This is an exciting story, a search that went on in your family for 117 years for a baseball card, and you were the guy who finally found it. But let's start at the beginning, and we got to tell this story. I know the audience is going to love this. So take us back to kind of how this all started for you and when you started hearing about this legendary baseball card.
All right. Yeah. So my family's been searching for a long time for this baseball card. So my mom is one of 13 kids. She's got six sisters, 6 brothers. And my grandfather and grandmother were longtime Central Oregon people. Before that, my great-grandfather moved here, and he played baseball at the turn of the century, early 1900s, late 1800s. And growing up, we all knew that he played professionally, and there was a myth legend in our family that he had a baseball card out there. In the 70s and 80s, you're not doing Google searches, not searching Yahoo. So, that's all it was a legend in our family for a lot of years.
And did your great grandfather, so the guy who played, and you said turn of the centuries, he played. I believe he played for the Phillies. Is that right? He was a catcher for the Phillies.
Yeah. So he played a lot of different positions as guys did back then. They didn't have big contracts. They played a lot of positions. My grandfather would tell stories about my grandfather, starting at catcher, having to play short, throwing a few innings from the mound. He even would tell one story about a game with Cy Young where my umpire didn't show up and my grandfather actually umpired the game instead of played that game. So, it was a different world back then. 1903 was the first World Series. So the E107, the 1903 set, most people consider that the first baseball card set of the modern era. And like I said, as a kid, my uncles had searched for this card. When we say search, they were actually physically writing letters to Baseball Hall of Fame, the Phillies, baseball card shops, different venues. They're writing letters. And then when I was a kid, early on, 10, 11, 12, I kind of picked up the reins and started searching for it as well.
And did your grandfather or your great-grandfather was the actual player, did either of them ever see the card?
I don't think either one of them ever saw it. I know my grandfather never saw it. And he didn't think that his father had ever seen it either. So, you're talking 1903. So all the research I've done, there was probably only a couple hundred cards printed. And it took them 7 years to print the cards. So there were guys on this 1903 set that had their pictures taken in 1886. So, it took them 7 years to print 150 cards. And so they didn't print a lot of them either. So, I don't think my great-grandfather ever saw it. I know my grandfather never saw it. I really wanted to find it before he passed away. But, he passed away and he never did see it. But he did have some brothers. And so, early on, when the internet first started coming out, I started searching the internet for it. And it wasn't until about 2007, 2008 that I finally found a picture of a card on the internet and was able to show my great uncles and my uncles.
Oh, so your first actual, so this was the first, so 2007, 2008. This was the first confirmation that this card actually existed. Your great-grandfather and your grandfather knew of the card and talked about the card, but had never seen the card. How did they even know about the card? Was it because I guess your great-grandfather probably had his photo taken for it. And is that how the kind of the legend, began?
Yeah. I think that, when you got your picture taken, it wasn't a quick process like it is today. So I think, he got his picture taken. He knew the cards were out there. But he had never seen it. So, and my grandfather had never seen it. So, at that point, you're talking about 100 years of just legend.
Right. It's 100 years of legend. And it sounds like before you found it on the internet, a tremendous amount of effort had gone in. You mentioned writing letters to baseball card stores and the Hall of Fame. Did you do any of that stuff yourself, when you kind of took over the search before the internet came along?
Yeah, I did. I started writing letters, like I said, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, when I first started searching for this. I wrote the Philadelphia Phillies organization, and they were able to send me stats, and they were able to send me some pictures of him. really unique picture. I sent it to you. I hope it goes up there, but it's a team photo and it's got a dog in the picture. You know, it just kind of shows you how the organization was back then. I mean, these guys love the game. They love the game. And, you know, that was the only reason they did it, is they love the game.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's not much different than Major League Baseball today when, as of the filming of this at least, the players and the owners are arguing over billions of dollars and they can't even come to an agreement, over billions of dollars, literally. So back then it was peanuts. And it was a love for the game that kept the players going. And who knew that some of the players from that era and their cards would become so famous and so sought after, but here we are today. So that's okay. So this is awesome. So in 2007, 2008, that was the first time you actually saw an image of the card. So tell me about that. You were searching on the internet. Where did you find it? What was that like?
So I found an image of it, and it was graded by PSA, I believe. The first image I found, and so I contacted them and asked if I could get a hold of the owner of the card. And of course, you know, they didn't want to give me any of that information or anything like that, and I don't blame them. But I really thought that if I could find somebody that had the card, eventually over time, that they would hopefully be sympathetic to the fact that it was my great grandfather, and that, you know, even though I knew that I would probably be paying a lot for it, I was really hopeful that there was somebody out there that would be sympathetic enough to go, hey, you know, this card deserves to be in this family, because it does. I mean, all those guys that played baseball at that time, all of us that have ancestors that played during those eras, you know, it's a huge piece of your history, a huge piece of your family. And so, you know, it was really important to me. And I had hoped that eventually that more would turn up over the next, years. And, as the internet grew, that more would turn up and that eventually I could find one to buy.
But the PSA population at that time, and I think it's still the case today, it was a population of one, right? Is there only one PSA graded card in existence of this particular card?
Yeah, there is. And so since that time, there is still only one.
Still only one with PSA.
Only one with PSA.
Amazing. So that was, you really needed PSA to give you the contact information, which they didn't. So there's at this point, you only know of one in the world, but there is one, because PSA has verified there's one and you found an image of it. When you went, you said your grandfather had passed away by this point in time, which was unfortunate. But you said that some of his brothers or sisters were still alive. Tell me about that. Who were you able to show it to when you found it?
So one of my uncles was late in his life and not in very good health, one of my great uncles. And so I was able to share that photo with him. And, he just lit up. I mean, it was amazing. It was very emotional to show him that picture. Him and his wife, they'd been married a long time. She knew, her father-in-law very well. And so it was very emotional just to have that paper, printout of the picture, of the card, not to even have the card. It was very emotional, and it was very fulfilling to know that, the search wasn't in vain, that if there was one out there, chances are there were more out there. Now you're talking 1903. So these cards came in candy at these games. So a kid would have to take that card and stick it in his back pocket, front pocket, right? Take it home. And then that thing would have to be stored. We didn't have these plastic containers and all that stuff. So then that thing would have to be stored and preserved for 100 years, and there was only a few hundred of them printed. So but I still hung on to that hope that there were some out there, that there were more out there and some would come up.
Yeah. So you've seen the one on the internet. You only know of one in existence. It's provided this awesome confirmation and has made your great uncle super happy. But then what? Because you're still left without the card. So I assume the search continued. Tell me about that.
So the search continues. Yeah. So the search continues. So I continue to, over the years, I continue to write emails, write big baseball card stores, dealers, just anybody I could find on the internet that I thought could possibly point me in a direction. From probably 86 to when I got married in 98, I probably wrote, 2,000 letters. And from about 2007, 2008 to about 2015, I probably sent, 5,000 emails out there.
Wow.
Searching for it. And then, so yeah, we're still, up until, so then about, 2012, 2013, all of a sudden one pops up on eBay. And this one is graded by SGC. So it's graded low, a very nice card. But one finally does pop up on eBay.
Wow.
So I start bidding on it, and the opening bid was fairly low, I think $99 or something like that. And the next thing I know, that it keeps going, and the bid's getting higher and higher, and by this time, I'm calling family members, going, "Hey, I found one. There's one on eBay. I'm out of money." So I've got, with 13 aunts and uncles on my mom's side, I've got, 50 first cousins, and I've got, probably 100 second cousins, a lot of family out there. So, it wasn't a matter of being outbid so much. I knew I could probably raise the money because I knew it was important to a lot of people in my family to have this card. But I really didn't know what I was doing in that market. And I hadn't bought cards that way before. And so ultimately I got outbid. So here we are, the second one that I came across, and it's gone like that.
Oh, wow. That's wow. Yeah. To have that opportunity with it in front of you there, and the ability to actually end the search with a success. And as far as this is possibly only the only other one in existence other than the PSA one, who you didn't know who owned it at the time. Wow. Okay. So that happened. I'm sure that was probably disappointing to not win the auction of that card.
Yeah, it was like a huge slap in the face, but on the other hand, now I had an eBay account, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I can get a hold of this guy, and maybe, he'll be willing to sell it at a profit, because money talks. So, and again, I thought, maybe he'll be sympathetic to my situation and the fact that this is my great grandfather. But again, I ended up making contact with the guy who won the auction, and had a telephone call with him, a brief telephone call, where he basically said, "Look, I'm trying to complete this whole set.
Yeah.
And if there's only 2 or 3 cards of your great grandfather out there, I only have a small percentage of getting every single one of these cards. So, at this particular time, I have no interest in selling it." And, I was understanding of that as a collector, as somebody that appreciates the hobby. I understood it. It stung a bit, but I understood it, and and I still hung on to that hope that, okay, now there's two, right? So maybe there's a few more out there. I had watched both the PSA population count and SGC population count, and I had seen that SGC had gone up to 5. So it had gone from 1 to 5 in just a few years. So I knew that there were more out there now. Now I knew there were 6 out there. And I had tracked down a few of the owners of the cards and basically had gotten the same story, hey, this is a rare set. This is a piece of history. And, we're not willing to part with it. And then I, about every time over the course of about 2007 to when I finally eventually found the card, every time I would start to like lose hope and stop looking, then that population count would go up, or something would re-spark my interest, and so I didn't want to give up. I got three boys, and like I said, a lot of first cousins, and I just wasn't willing to give up on it. So last year, in November of last year, I check, the PSA counts. I check the SGC counts, on a regular basis, and I also check, all the sites very often. From Heritage to eBay, I check all those sites. Goodwin, and in November of last year, a card finally popped up again that was for auction of my great grandfather. So I immediately contacted the seller, who was also an Oregon guy. So these cards were given out in the New England states, in that area, and so it was crazy that all this time I had been searching, and less than all over the country, and less than an hour or hour and a half down the road from me, the card pops up from a collector. Wow. And this guy was awesome. He had bought. He was also a guy that was trying to complete the set. He had bought a lot at auction. There was a lot of like 17 cards that was found a few years back, and the gentleman who found them had got them graded by SDC, and then took them to auction. And this particular collector had bought a lot of cards, so it was like 17 cards of the 1903 set. And when he bought that lot, he ended up with doubles of my great grandfather. And so he was trying to raise some money to buy some of the cards he didn't have. So he was getting rid of some of the doubles. And he was the guy, man. I mean, he was the guy. He was sympathetic to the fact that it was my great grandfather. He was sympathetic to the fact that he was an Oregon guy, and hobby enthusiast. And he was willing to part with it finally. So here we are today. And I'll tell you what, by the time I sent him that money, and it only took about a day for me to get that card, and I didn't sleep a wink. I was up all night, pacing, waiting for the mail. And of course, the mail doesn't come until about 7:30 that night. And it wasn't until I actually had that card in my hand that, here we were. Like I said, my grandfather was the greatest guy I ever met. My uncles, fantastic guys, just great dudes. And I get goosebumps still when I talk about it. So holding that card was so emotional. It was a search that had gone on in our family for, over 100 years. And God, it was something special, something that I can't even explain. I have a hard time finding the words. When you search that hard for something and it has that much meaning to your family, it was just overwhelming, and it still is to even talk about it. And I here we are in June, and I got it in November, and I've done a few of these interviews and stuff, and I still can't get over it, and it still is just emotional to talk about.
Incredible story. So you got the card there, right? Show us the card. Show us the card.
All right. Here we go.
There it is.
So these 1903 cards, they had 3 different backs when they were printed. And on the back of this one, it says 1 of 150 prominent baseball players. So there's the back of it.
Very cool.
This particular card was just authenticated. It doesn't have a grade on it. And it's definitely seen some better days. It's worn. It was well loved by whoever owned this thing, which makes me appreciate it even more.
Sure.
Absolutely. Wow, what an awesome story. Very, very cool. Well, congratulations on getting the card. That's after all those years. What an amazing story. So once you actually got it, what did you do with it? Did you have to go show it to all of your, countless cousins and, nephews and everyone else?
I let my dad do that. So, so it was Thanksgiving was coming up. And like I said, when you have family of, that much family, Thanksgiving holidays, we usually rent a hall or a big building to have it in. And last year they did as well. And so my dad and my mom's father were pretty close, and the card was pretty special to my parents as well. So I let them have the honors of going and showing it off. And it was one of these things where everybody wanted their picture with it, and I got to sit there and just kind of watch it get passed around. And still, my cousins will come into town or aunts and uncles, and that's the first thing they want to talk about. They want to see it, they want to talk about it, and so it's something special for sure.
Very, very neat. So let's talk a little bit more about your great grandfather. So we know he was on the Phillies. We know he was a catcher. William Klondike Douglas, is that right?
Yeah. So 1903, everybody had a nickname, right?
Right.
So my great grandfather, this story goes, and again, this is a long time ago, but during the off season, he would go up and fish in the Klondikes, and so there wasn't anything real unique about the fact, but everybody gave him a hard time about going up to the Klondikes to fish, so they started calling him Klondike. So even on his tombstone here in Central Oregon, it says William Klondike Douglas.
Nice.
Two S's.
And you talked a little bit about his career earlier. What do you know about like his stats or how long he played for? Were the Phillies able to give you some of that type of information?
Yeah, I got a lot of stats on him. He played I think 8 years in the majors. He played on a few different teams. Like I said, he played a lot of different positions. He started with the St. Louis Browns. Yeah, so 1903 was the first World Series. Boston played Pittsburgh in a 9-game series in 1903, and Boston ended up winning that series. My grandfather always talked about, how up until that year, my great grandfather started playing in 1896. He went to the St. Louis Browns as an outfielder. He was a really good hitter. And then they found out he could catch. So when he got traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, they moved him to catcher, and he spent the rest of his career all the way to 1906 as a catcher or a first baseman. And then he continued to play after that in the minor leagues, and actually he came out here to Central Oregon. We've got a small farm team here. It's now mostly a college kid team. You know, back then it was a farm team of the Philadelphia Phillies. And, you know, he did a lot of coaching and teaching baseball to kids in this area, you know, and all the way up until he died. You know, he tried to, you know, I'm a high school coach here in our town. I coach at one of the high schools. I coach soccer. And as a coach, you always, it's not about the wins and losses so much. It's about, you know, making sure the kids love the game. And my great-grandfather and my grandfather were all about loving the game and teaching kids to love the game. And so, you know, he spent the rest of his life here in Oregon, you know, practicing what he preached and making sure that everybody he touched loved the game. You know, they might not be the best baseball players, but they loved playing. I sent you a few pictures. In our town, we have a river that runs through our town, and one of the first baseball fields we had in our town was about from home plate to the fence is about 220, and there's still stories, still legends of my grandfather and his brothers, you know, being one of the few people in our town that could actually hit the ball out of the park and over the other side of the river. So I always find that as a fun story, you know, seeing old timers around town, and when they find out, you know, it's a smaller town. Like I said, I got a lot of family here, so when they find out what family I'm a part of, they always talk about that. You know, the people that were brought up in this town.
Sure, very neat, very, very neat. Wow. And meanwhile, it's worth noting that while you were searching for his baseball card for so many years, you actually were a bit of a collector yourself and had the foresight to buy some 1980s basketball cards. And I believe you actually completed a set of 86 Fleer basketball back when 86 Fleer basketball wasn't nearly as popular as it is today. So tell me a little bit more about what you have there.
Well, you know, like I said, sports were always on the TV, and my grandparents had this house downtown in our area, and all of us grandkids that were about that age would spend the summers at my grandparents playing baseball. We would literally get on our bikes, ride around town. We would usually go buy a few packs of baseball, basketball cards, open them up, and then we were looking for games to play. Basketball, baseball, football, looking for other kids to take on. Maybe a wrestling match, maybe a boxing match here and there, who knows. But, you know, 86 was kind of the first year that I really started collecting. And on the baseball side, you know, other than Jose Canseco, you know, there's a few cards that stand out in those 86 baseball years. 85, you know, you got Clemens. But you know, I completed my first set was 86 Fleer. And, you know, I kind of talked a little bit about how, you know, my grandfather's card went in the back pocket of some kid, you know, and he took it home. And I remember doing that. I remember sticking my cards in my back pocket, riding my bike all over town, getting home, getting my cards back. So I did. I completed the 86 Fleer basketball. Not once, but I think I have 4 or 5 of those sets. When I started sending those cards in to get graded, you know, they were coming back with just these horrendous grades, you know. I didn't know anything about grading, and of course I didn't know a whole lot as a 10, 12-year-old kid on taking care of my cards. So, like I said, from my back pocket to getting those things graded in you know, 2010, 2012, you know, these cards were coming back with, you know, grades like this, like 2.5, you know, creases all over. But I've got a large collection of 96 Fleer. a lot of boxes. I saved a lot of boxes from, we would get them for $4 for $1 at the local baseball card store. And so we would buy, a whole box of them at a time and go back to my grandparents' house and sit there and open them up and trade, go back and forth with them. But I hung on to some boxes throughout the years. I also hung on to some packs and submitted some of those to PSA over the years. I've got some packs, 86 Fleer. I've got some packs of 86 baseball and 85 baseball that I hung on to and then sent them off for grading, within the last 10 years. Both PSA and Beckett, they both do really nice jobs. I really, I wanted to make sure that I had a set for each one of my boys. And then, so I had 4 completed sets, and I've got 3 boys, and I just completed a 4th set because I now have a grandson. So I wanted to.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Don, this has been a great episode with Father's Day upon us. It's pretty awesome to end it on that note. I hope that someday I'm able to bestow a set of 86 Fleer basketball upon my sons as well. But of course, the price to collect one of those today has certainly gone up a little bit. But that's awesome. Congratulations on the 117-year search for your great-grandfather's baseball card coming to a successful conclusion. What an awesome Father's Day story.
Yeah, it is. It's a great story. And thank you for having me on, and thank you for all you've done for this sport or this hobby. You've done a fantastic job with everything you got going on, and I appreciate being on your show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don, and happy Father's Day to you. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Don Emerson. What a cool story. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you guys have a great Father's Day. And please join me and my team the next couple of days at the Sport Card Expo, the online free sports card show. It is at sportcardexpo.com, sports without an S. Go register right now at sportcardexpo.com for this free show that this group in Canada is putting on. It's going to be a big show, tons of dealers, and we're supporting it. We're going to be there. Hope to see you stop by our booth to say hello and to check us out speaking at the Sport Card Expo. It is Friday and Saturday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you there. And in the meantime, have a great next couple of days. Have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Father's Day. And I'll see you back then with my next episode. Take care.